In this lesson, I'm going to cover the benefits of practicing arpeggios and other textures on a single string. So for example, taking an arpeggio pattern, but practicing it on a single open string. And the benefits range from increased accuracy, as well as economic or efficient movements in the fingers, control over your tone in each finger, tone being, the quality of the timbre of the tone itself, as well as the volume, rhythmic evenness, as well as multi-layered muscle memory awareness. So building muscle memory into your hands of the patterns that you need to know in a new way, to engage your muscle memory in a secondary way to improve your overall abilities and skills. I'll use some examples from my technique book. If you're looking for exercises to work on, at the beginning of my technique book, there's 100 open string exercises. These are particularly useful for turning into single string exercises. Or Giuliani's 120 arpeggios, which are in my book. You could also turn all of those into single string exercises as well. But you can definitely use your own exercises or excerpts from your repertoire, which we'll talk about as well. All of those things can accomplish this task. So we'll go through the benefits one at a time so you can just get some context on what we're talking about, and I'll show you examples along the way. So the first benefit is accuracy and economic or efficient movements in the fingers. So small confined movements are good in general for your practice and require you to be a little bit more precise, because if you aren't, you'll accidentally hit a wrong string. So let's say you have like a Giuliani arpeggio, or let's actually change it. That is a PIMA pattern. When you transfer that to an open string, suddenly all your finger movements have to be contained in one very precise area. And if you do it on the second string instead of the first string, then you also have to be super accurate, because if you just throw your hand into it, you'll hit wrong strings. If you just slightly overshoot, you might hit the E string by accident. If you slightly if you do a deep finger stroke without much follow through in towards the palm, you might accidentally hit the string below, the G string. See, like there, I did that without thinking, and I accidentally hit the G string. So taking this and turning it into this. So that first thing was accuracy and small efficient movements. So yeah, by forcing yourself to play it on the second string, for example, you were really forcing yourself to do small, precise movements in a very contained location, which will build accuracy and precision. Another benefit is working on your tone control in each finger. So you have to ask yourself, how similar is each finger's tone production in terms of both timbre, so like in terms of like a bright sound or a real smooth sound, or in volume, is one finger loud while the other finger's soft? You can test each finger more accurately here. So I have a tendency to accidentally bring out my M finger more than the other fingers. Maybe that's because it's longer, maybe not. But nevertheless, it tends to come out of the texture a little too much. And of course, my thumb sounds a little bit different than my fingers, both in timbre and volume as well. So trying to even that out is a really great thing to do, because it's sometimes hard to tell when we play across the strings, because the thumb's playing a bass string, which sounds just different already. And each of the fingers are playing a different string. Like the A fingers may be playing this high E string, which is a thin, tiny, high-pitched string. And so you might think that you have a pretty even tone, but then you go to a single string and suddenly you're like, oh, wait, my tone is not that even between each finger. So it allows you to work on tone control in each finger as well as volume control in each finger as well. One way of balancing out your volume more is by, if you have a finger that's underproducing sound, is not producing enough volume, by doing a deeper follow through in towards the palm, you can sometimes just get more volume out of that. I actually, in my technique book, I have some exercises where you accent one finger at a time out of the arpeggio pattern. So maybe you accent the I finger or the M finger. Learning how to control the tone or the volume of each finger in a texture. So you might have to work on that, but nevertheless, practicing the exercise on a single string will teach you much more about your own abilities. Another benefit is rhythmic evenness. It's sometimes tricky when we're going across the strings. Even here, my rhythmic evenness, there I corrected a little bit. My rhythmic evenness was really leaning towards the thumb being quite a long note, and then the other fingers kind of catching up. So it was like long catch-up notes, and then long, and then a whole bunch of catch-up notes. As opposed to even 16th notes where each one, that's more even now. And when we switch that to an open string, you can hear it actually right now that my thumb is getting slightly more elongation on the note. So maybe I would practice staccato, which trains the fingers to be on the string before they have to play, which can often lead to increased rhythmic accuracy. That's a little bit more even now. But it really emphasizes the deficiencies in rhythm when you put it on a single string. Another benefit would be multi-layered muscle memory awareness. That's a really fancy way of saying practice it in a new way. So instead of doing this over and over, and just like hoping that it will get better, you can take that pattern and put it onto a single string, and you'll be working that pattern with your hand, but you'll be, along with all the other things we talked about, like all the other benefits, you'll just be working it in a new way, which will bring an increased awareness into your hand about what you're actually doing. Sometimes we have so much muscle memory layered up of things we've done lots of times before, that doing it in a new way can just bring awareness into our fingers and add a secondary layer of muscle memory that will teach our muscle movements just what we're actually doing quite a bit better. I particularly find when I put it on a single string, I'll sometimes find that my fingers, these fingers, are plucking up. They sometimes get into the habit of plucking up like this, rather than following their movement in towards the palm more. And as soon as I switch to following my natural trajectory of the finger in towards the palm, the more I find it feels better. It feels more natural, and my tone gets better, and my evenness gets better. And the relaxation in my hand gets better as well. So it's not only does it impart new muscle memory into the pattern, it also just brings a lot of awareness into your own mind about what you're actually doing. Another great benefit is whenever we practice any of these arpeggio patterns or anything else and turn it into a single string exercise, it's really great practice for your tremolo because you're just working tremolo patterns in various finger combinations. So you're just really working that single string, which is excellent for your tremolo. It's kind of like a byproduct of doing this is that you'd be always practicing your tremolo exercises. And any excerpt from your repertoire can be turned into single string exercises. You can also do all of this stuff on open strings. Like if you're doing that, you can take the left hand out and practice on open strings. But it's a little different than turning it into a single string exercise where again, the accuracy and efficient movements are just so much more important. So that's just a little way. That's a little technique I use to practice a lot of my material and to bring in a new awareness, and so that we don't just sit around practicing the same pattern over and over exactly, but instead you change it up a little bit, turn it into a single string exercise for just like 30 seconds, and then go back to the exercise and see if you've learned anything. Maybe for some of you, you'll go through each one of my benefits and really work each one to really improve your arpeggio or whatever texture you're working on. And for other people, maybe it would just be like, I'm going to do that to double check to see what my skill level actually is for this pattern. And you'll find that certain patterns give you more trouble than others on a single string. Instead of sometimes students will have a very difficult time if they start with instead of P-I-M-A, if they start with I-M-A-P, I-M-A-P. They'll find that their accuracy goes down. I even hit a wrong string there by accident there. So always brings things into your awareness, and it's a new way of practicing, which is always a good idea, that you don't just do the same thing over and over, but you work it in different ways to make sure that you identify things to work on and then you improve.